We are here today to celebrate a birth. It's not a baby, but yeah, it is. It's a bouncing baby book. And books are so important. They're important to our movement. And I know this isn't the golden age of the printed word. We have all kinds of ways to get information from people online and to get information online that isn't even from people. But there's something really special about cozying up with a book in a way you just can't cozy up with a bot. And the book we're going to be talking about today is a dazzler. Hi, everybody. I am Victoria Moran, and this is the Main Street Vegan Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today. And my guest is somebody that you probably know, and if you do, you love her. She is Renee King-Sonnen, and the book is Rowdy Girl Confessions. Oh my goodness, my screen isn't working very well. Confessions of a Vegan Cattle Rancher. You can't see the book very well, so you're just going to have to buy it and then you can see it perfectly. It comes out today, if you are watching or listening, on June 25th, 2026, which is the birth date of Rowdy Girl Confessions of a Vegan Cattle Rancher. And if you don't yet know Renee King-Sonnen is a Texas powerhouse. She is a former cattle rancher who saw the truth, turned vegan, and never looked back. She took the very industry that she was part of, and along with her husband, Tommy Sonnen, flipped the script and transformed their ranch into Rowdy Girl Sanctuary, a groundbreaking safe haven for farm animals once destined for slaughter. Rowdy Girl is the first documented beef cattle ranch in the world to go vegan. It's the subject of the documentary film Rowdy Girl and the inspiration for Renee's new book, her autobiography, as well as the biography of the sanctuary Rowdy Girl. And you know what, Renee? People call you Rowdy Girl just as often as they call you Renee, even though I know that Rowdy Girl was the name of the wonderful, inspiring cow being that started it all. So, welcome.
Thank you, Victoria. It's so good to be here. As always, I love chatting with you.
Well, I do too, because we have a lot of parallels, and we're going to be talking about some of those today. And even our shirts. I see your shirt says vegan, and mine is compassion is the new black.
Oh,
So,
well, one of those.
yeah, that's Kimberly Wilson, a graduate of Main Street Vegan Academy. She's one of the Renaissance women, psychologist, yogini, designer. As are you, a Renaissance woman. My gosh, you're a singer. You're a yogini as well. Oh yeah, you're a cattle rancher. So let us start at the beginning for those people who don't know you. How did all this come about? And then bring us up to your wonderful book.
How it all came about. Well, well, this is 2026. It came about in 2014 when I went vegan on a Texas cattle ranch on Halloween. Um, but what led up to me going vegan was a lot of things. And so if you want to know about all of the things that led up to me going vegan on a cattle ranch, go to our website, read the book, because we would be here for the whole podcast if I told you all those things. So, needless to say, suffice it to say that I went vegan on a cattle ranch October 31st, 2014. And it was a very scary day. And it's all documented in my book. It's documented on our website and all the news stories, including Victoria Moran, who's interviewed me over the years. So, but I want to fast forward from the day I went vegan to say that after I went vegan on a cattle ranch, which, you're not supposed to do if you're married to a cattle rancher, I didn't, I didn't know that I was the first to live and tell about it, pretty much. And so I did show and tell. And as I started talking about it, vegans started coming out of the closet, if you will, in Texas, and online. to help me buy my husband's cows. I ended up buying my husband's cows as a result. And again, all the sequencing is in my book. Um, it takes me a long time to tell this story, Victoria. So if I don't really condense it, we won't have time to talk about anything else. So if I don't know what all you want to know, but just suffice it to say that I went vegan on a cattle ranch and made my husband's life a living HELL until he went vegan. I guess he went vegan May 2nd of 2015. Our nonprofit started February the 20th of 2015. And in between all of that was me doing everything I could to convert my husband, to veganism. I was not very kind to him. I called him a murderer every chance I got. I couldn't stand being in my home because my husband was also a hunter. And when I say he was a hunter, he didn't just hunt a little bit, he hunted every year. He always got his limit. He had everything from, deer to exotic animals, like, I mean, not wild animals like from Africa or anything, but, wild animals in the extent of, you know, deer, elk, you know, all those kinds of animals, axis deer. I mean, just there was a pig on his wall. I mean, he just had, I mean, it was just unbelievable the amount of horns and heads my husband had acquired, the amount of animals he had personally killed with a gun himself in the name of, feeding the family and while just killing all the other families. You don't even think about those things until you think about those things.
No.
And
Well,
so yeah. So anyway, we became a nonprofit February the 20th. I don't know. I can talk about just this part of the story forever.
Well, I do want to ask a little bit about this. So I want to know about you when you met him. Now, he's a very attractive man, and I know attractive goes a long way. But as I think about you as someone who was already in yoga, you already had this idea of compassion and the oneness of life. And he had heads on his wall. Now I'm thinking back to myself when I fell in love with my current husband. And I had been married before, beautiful, gentle soul, passed away, vegan. And then I dated a bunch of spiritual vegetarians, and they were kind of a little bit, didn't work out. And so I said, okay, Victoria, you are 45 years old. Nobody is going to marry you. So just, date a nice omnivore. So I did that. But I don't think if he'd been a nice omnivore with heads on the wall, I could have done it. But you did. So what attracted you? What did the heads look like before you were vegan to you?
They were what he did. I'm from Texas, and just because I was a yogini didn't mean I had any problem with it. And
Okay.
that's why I talk about it in the book. There's a whole chapter on ahimsa in my book because I have 1,000 hours of teacher training in yoga, and one of the real problems I have with yoga in today's society, unless you come from the amazing Jiva Mukti yoga or
Mm-hmm.
like integral yoga, which is,
Mm-hmm.
really, they're pretty advanced, but they're still vegetarian. Um, is that most yoga studies do not promote true ahimsa.
No.
They do not promote true nonviolence. They skip over it and they do not even want to talk about it. In fact, I went through a recent teacher training here locally. I won't say who it is, but it I was a vegan, and they ate meat. They had cheese. We'd go to these gatherings, and I got in trouble at one point because I was in the yoga studio and I was talking, my vegan activism, and I was pretty much told, to tone it down in the yoga studio, that I was, there to have community and yoga with everybody and not to, upset anybody about, veganism and the ethics I had around all that. So I had to tone it. But girl, let me tell you, in Texas, there's not a lot of yoga studios that you can go to that I don't know of any, honestly, where they promote true ahimsa. So
Yeah,
I
it's
have
it's
true problems with that. So when I moved in with Tommy and the heads, I mean, I we're compartmentalized. We are
mm,
desensitized. I didn't see any problem. That's what he did. He was a rancher. He was a hunter. I never once, you know, thought bad about him doing that. Now, I didn't want to hunt. In fact, he asked me on several occasions if I wanted to learn how to hunt. No, I didn't even want to play with a gun. I don't want to play with guns. I'm not into that. But, you know, that's what my husband did. And I ate the meat.
mm. That is so interesting. So I'm trying to draw some parallels. So for me, okay, my husband was a lawyer and I didn't want to do that. My husband did go vegetarian 2 weeks after we met. And he told me this story that he had gone hunting in Arkansas with his cousins when he was 12. And somebody gave him a gun and he killed some small kind of game bird. I don't know what it was. But he said it absolutely broke his heart. He hadn't realized when he shot this pistol what was going to happen. And that life left this world because of what he did. And he made a solemn vow he would never, ever kill anybody ever again. But the cognitive dissonance, it didn't apply to the plate. But it did after he met me. And then obviously, you know, with your husband, who had not only the tradition and the taste and the heritage and all, his business was wrapped up in the animal agriculture industry. So how did that work?
Did
When
that work? Well, it wasn't like his sole business. You know, he worked for Dow Chemical for 40 years. The cattle ranch, when he acquired the cattle ranch, it was because he wanted to have a an asset in his portfolio that would enable him to retire early. And so he picked up the ranching baton of his forefathers and
mm,
bought a cattle ranch. And he had helped his great grandfather and his, you know, he had helped his grandfather. I'm not sure if he helped his great grandfather or not, but I know he helped his grandfather. His dad helped his grandfather on the cattle ranch before it burned up. It burned to the ground. But, you know, Tommy himself, you know, it wasn't like his sole vocation, but he sunk a lot of his hard earned money in that cattle ranch and all of the equipment, the tractors, all of the, you know, equipment necessary, all of the feed, all of the hay. He spent a ton of money. And so it was a side business for us. And it was a very good side business for us. And, you know, me jumping in the middle of it and throwing a wrench in it was not in the plans.
so what happened that Halloween that caused you to change?
Melanie Joy's dissertation on carnism, um, Dr. Melanie Joy's, and you know, I had been watching slaughterhouse videos for months prior to that one video that changed everything. And so I will say it was an accumulating effect. Um, I got married to Tommy in 2010, moved in with him in 2009, and didn't go vegan until 2014. Acquired Rowdy Girl, the calf, in 2010. And so it took me almost 5 years to break through that cognitive dissonance because I loved Rowdy Girl. And it took me all of those years to educate myself, do the research, to feel the feelings, all the feelings I was having about all of this, to go all through the motions of questioning things, which I talk about in detail in the book. You know, I had so many questions, so many awakenings along the way. Like it talks about in recovery, you know, we have a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience. I had a lot of those along the way. And the final awakening, if you will, was on Halloween 2014 when I watched Dr. Melanie Joy's dissertation on carnism, where everybody's sitting around the table, the family eating beef stew. and we were getting ready to go to his mother's house for the annual block party where all the kids come dressed in their costume and all the family members, and we all go outside and, we enjoy the parade and the candy being thrown at the kids, and we always had a meal there. So this was every year. And so I had watched this dissertation on carnism, and it was a family enjoying beef stew, and everybody was loving the beef stew. And I loved beef stew. I used to eat it all the time. My mother made the best beef stew ever, and I made it just like her. And so when you know around the table when they were eating it, somebody said, well, I love this so much, what's the recipe? And the lady of the house, said, well, I'm so glad you asked. You start off with a pound of young golden retriever. Well, as soon as she said that, everybody was like, "Oh my God," and they couldn't eat. And I'm on the other side of the screen going, "Oh my God." And I don't know. After months of watching all those slaughterhouse videos, doing all my research about what we were doing, driving my husband crazy, not a vegan, just trying to understand what we were up against, what we were doing, why we were doing it. Um, don't ask me why I decided to do all that, except that I started waking up and I wanted to do my research. And the Dr. Melanie Joy video was my final research. I know that now. I didn't know it then. That that was the aha moment. Whenever I saw that, I just went, now I didn't go vegan. In fact, I wasn't even thinking about going vegan. Thinking about going vegan never occurred to me. I didn't even know I was going vegan that day. I never planned on it. I wasn't transitioning. I went through that door like gangbusters when we went to Epi's house, Tommy's mother's, just about an hour or so after I watched that. We walk into the house at his mother's house, and all the kids were there in their costumes, and everybody was talking and chattering. And my mother in law comes out with a big old pot of beef stew. And, I do believe my higher power divine divinely intervened for me that day. I think it took what it took. It took those 4.5 years of me watching all those slaughterhouse videos, finally watching the Dr. Melanie Joy video, considering going humane, doing all the things. It took what it took, as we always say in recovery, for me to get to that point on that day, in that moment, for me to look at that beef stew and say out loud, I can't eat that. No way I can eat that. And my mother-in-law was like, why, Renee? And I said, because it's got floating dead, hacked up animal bodies in it. And so I had never called meat floating dead, hacked up animal bodies in a bowl. I had never said those words in a sequence. And everybody in the room looked at me. Everybody stopped talking. And my mother-in-law asked me to repeat myself. She said, what did you say? What did you say? And I repeated myself in the silence. And when I repeated myself in the silence, I heard myself say it. And I was like, I'm done. Just kind of like when I finally got sober and surrendered. I mean, I was done. And my mother in law was like, well, Renee, you can pick it out. And I was like, no, there is no more picking it out for me. And just like when people used to say, oh, well, can't you just have one drink? No, I can't have one drink. And no, I'm not going to pick it out. Not because I feel I'm being deprived, but because I finally had an ethical awakening on a cattle ranch. And I didn't know I was going vegan. All I know is I had a recall in my mind at that time of I think I went vegan. It was like, oh my God, I think I just went vegan. And I it was like I didn't say it out loud. It was just a thought that I had. And because I was done, you know? And yeah, so that was the moment of reckoning.
Wow, golly. So tell us a little bit about how your recovery journey juxtaposes with your veganism, your yoga, your life, and who you are.
Yeah, yeah, it took me a long time to get sober. I always, say, um, it's taken me 35, almost 36 years to get almost 14 years. I have 13 and a half years sober. And, if you do the math, I've been vegan 11 and a half years. Um, I was only vegan like a year, I mean, only sober like a year and I think 9 months before I went vegan. And what I realized when I was writing the book, and it was much later in the process, it was like during one of the editing phases, when I had this aha moment and I had to go in and expand on this in the book because I realized that if I would not have gone vegan when I did, I would have relapsed or killed myself. Because now I say that and I don't mean I'm not saying it lightly. I just know now that because I relapsed in the marriage this time, I relapsed after Tommy and I got married this last time. We got married in 2010, and I actually had a relapse, almost died. I talk about it in the book. I mean, I lived, and looking back on it all now, I really do believe that my relapse was connected to what we were doing as cattle ranchers because I didn't want to look at it. Okay. And so when I finally did go vegan and not know it, until I was just started going, oh my God, that's what Peter's been talking about. That's what some of these, I would land when I was watching those slaughterhouse videos, I would land on some sites that would talk about veganism. But I never gave it even a minute's notice. I never dove into any of that. Because if you're a cattle rancher's wife, you don't ponder those things. You don't even think about going there because it's a betrayal. It's a betrayal against your husband, against the tradition of cattle ranching. So why would I think about that, right? But I unconsciously was taking in what vegan meant without giving it too much thought.
Mm.
Okay? And so when I got sober again, January the 8th of 2013, Tommy and I had been married uh, almost almost 3 years. And so it didn't take me long to relapse in the marriage. And I didn't think I'd ever relapse again after when Tommy and I got married. I thought I was done, you know. But there's a tenet in recovery to thine own self be true. And what I wasn't doing was being true to my ahimsa nature.
Mm.
And I didn't even know that. I didn't even recognize that until I was in the latter stages of editing my book. And I had this aha moment that I remembered. I remembered sitting on my couch. Um, it was the day I woke up from a near fatal overdose of I had drank the day before and I had injected 30 vials at least over the extended day, over a 24-hour period of Demerol, 100 milligram Demerol. And it's enough to kill you. And I didn't die. I spaced it all out and I had been doing my tolerance was so high. And I passed out on my couch. When I came to, I was hardly breathing. It was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and my TV was still on. The news was on, not because I was watching it, but because my husband was watching the news and he had left the TV on. And guess who was on the news?
Who?
Bill O'Reilly. So I wake up from my stupor, like barely able to even function, drooling, uh, almost, I mean, I couldn't even hardly breathe. And I'm hearing Bill O'Reilly interview these two men about alcohol and drug addiction. They had written a book, and if you want to know who they are and you want to know the rest of the story, you got to buy the book because I ain't going to tell you. But anyway, they were talking about alcohol and drug addiction, and all of a sudden, in my living room, it sounded like I was in a meeting and Bill O'Reilly was the chairperson. You can't make this up.
No, you can't.
And I was like, and so I took all that in, but I never gave it a minute's thought until years later when I was editing my book. Because it occurred to me that I remembered this. I remembered this Bill O'Reilly moment and these people he was interviewing. Excuse me. And I thought, because I was trying to understand how I how I relapsed and how come, the big question for me in all this is how come I pushed my husband so far, when I went vegan? How come I called him a murderer? How come I challenged, cattle ranching tradition? How come I came out, like gangbusters, to save all these animals from going to slaughter? How come I started a nonprofit in this regard? How come I've used the Rowdy Girl story to amplify compassion for farm animals worldwide? How come? It is because if I would not have gotten sober and stayed sober, I would have relapsed or killed myself. And I know that today. And so, anyway, so I went back when I was doing all the editing and I did some research just to satisfy my own sleuth in me. And sure enough, on January the 8th, 2013, Bill O'Reilly interviewed these two people, these two men, and the entire transcript is in my book.
Wow. That's a story. And everybody listening, I think you're getting the message that in this book that is birthing today, Rowdy Girl Confessions of a Vegan Cattle Rancher, it is full of stories. It is gripping stories. And these are the kind of stories that change people. I mean, it's important that we know the terrible things that go on in animal agriculture. It's important that we understand about our arteries and how much water it takes to make beef, etc. Yes, but these stories are how we really communicate and how we really change. And like you, I share that I'm in recovery. A lot of people don't, and that's great, good for them. For me, and my story is through food addiction as opposed to alcohol addiction, but I was fighting with myself trying to stop binge eating and then going into the 7-Eleven late at night and trying to find those binge foods that didn't have some kind of whey in there or some kind of egg albumin or something. And then it would just be like, what the hell? Just, load up on the cheese and the milk chocolate. And when it finally collided for me, when I finally truly surrendered, and I'd been working on it for like 11 years, I was a slow learner. It all came together at you give everything to the higher power. You get out of the food business. You stop trying to do it yourself because have you noticed you're not very good at it? And of course, be a full-time vegan. It's not your higher power that stopped you from being vegan. It's all this other stuff, cultural and physical and fear.
Fear, fear. I know we were,
Fear.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a biggie. So, Renee, as you go out into the world one more time, you've gone out so many times with so many things, the wonderful stories from the sanctuary, your fabulous documentary, and now you're going to be going out with this new book. You've already done TV in Austin and around and about. So, what's the message? What's the succinct message that you want to get into people's minds as you have this new opportunity to carry the message?
Well, the biggest message that I have is I want to be able to get out of the choir. Now, granted, I'm going to be going into the choir like Main Street Vegan and other vegan conferences. I'm speaking at Summer Vegan Fest as well in July.
Yep, me
Uh,
too. See you there.
I'll see you there. I'm going to be at Vibrant Vegan Fest, and I
Nice.
think that's in August. I think I don't know.
Yeah, that's the one in Kansas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be fun.
Yeah, and so there's all these vegan conferences I'm going to be
Yeah.
at, which is that's the opening. But the message I want to get is when I am out speaking into these vegan conferences, my publicity team, my book team, is they are scouting other places for me to go speak so I can speak to rural communities, so I
Mhm.
can speak to yoga communities, recovery communities, because this book crosses trauma, you know, sexual abuse. I mean, I have had so much sexual abuse, been raped multiple times, and just like animals. And so the message is not just to speak to vegans and say, hey, go vegan. It's to give vegans a resource. The book is full of resources. I actually paid extra to have them all indexed in the back of the book so that you can give this book to people in rural communities, yoga communities, domestic violence, sexual abuse, associations and people that have experienced that, and recovery, and make sure that, people know that being being a meat eater is another addiction. Just drinking milk, cheese, all of that, being addicted. We are addicted in a society that is, I mean, we find any and everything to be addicted to. So, I want to be able to get out of the choir and go speak to all these other populations so that I can help people wake up because the book crosses over all those boundaries.
Right. And I love it when we are in the vegan world thinking of that ripple effect. Because for me, the big experience of that in my life was back in the 90s, the phone rings. And I pick it up, and it's this student from Grinnell College who tells me that he read an article I wrote in the Animals Agenda, which was this little magazine only read by people in the animal rights movement, which in the 90s was not very big. But for some reason, Grinnell College had a subscription. And he said, I read your article and now I'm vegan. And I said, that's really good. By the way, what's your name? Bruce Friedrich. Well, for anybody
Wow.
that doesn't know, Bruce Friedrich is now heads up the Good Food Institute. He spent 20 years at PETA. He was a farm sanctuary for a while. He's an attorney. Yeah. So you don't
Wow. I
know,
didn't
because
know
somebody would say,
that.
if I had been going to some kind of coach to get out there more as a writer at that time, they would say, don't write for those little bitty publications. They hardly pay anything. Nobody's reading them. But guess what? You get one Bruce Friedrich and
Oh,
your life, it has value.
Dr. Melanie
So,
Joy woke me. Dr. Melanie Joy was the final, pixie stick, if you will, that
yeah.
broke me.
That's right. And so you're one of hers. And she has, I'm
Yes.
sure, met. And you know what's really funny? Guess who I interviewed 2 days ago for this podcast for next week? Dr.
Dr.
Melanie
Melanie
Joy.
Joy. Oh, I love her so much.
Yeah, she is. She's pretty amazing. So, Renee, let's talk about this population that you are more qualified to talk to and relate to and understand than probably anybody, and that is the rural farming, ranching population. Now, a lot of people in the vegan movement just they just can't even imagine how these other fellow humans think
Yeah.
when that's where I come from. I'm from Missouri. I called my book and my everything Main Street Vegan because I think we need to be on Main Street. And there you are, cattle rancher, Texas. Tell us about the mindset of the rural American trying to make a living and do the best they can.
Yeah. I always say, cattle ranchers, farmers that farm animals are, or even, farm food for animals, they're the salt of the earth. They're people that'll give you the shirt off your back. They love the land. They love the animals. It's just they are indoctrinated to believe that animals are here for us to commodify. They really believe that, and most of the ones I know are traditional Christians, and they believe that God put animals on this planet for us to use, you know, and it's very difficult to break through that. Oh, the other population that I want to reach into is, because rural America are mainly Christians. Anyway, in the United States, most of them.
Hmm.
And I want to reach, into the Christian populations and talk, I want to go to churches like cowboy churches. Uh, I mean, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of a cowboy church, but rural Americans, they actually have a cowboy church. They go to church and they listen to the word of God, and they wear their cowboy boots, their spurs, um, their belt buckles, their jeans, their hats, and they may have the little container of skull in their back pocket, and they'll hear the word of God. They'll have a big, barbecue after, and then right next door to their church usually is a small arena where they have a little rodeo and the kids, and they all learn how to rope calves and catch pigs and do all that stuff. So I want to take the word of Rowdy. How about the word of Rowdy? I want to take the word of Rowdy into those populations as well, because
Wow.
because as a former cattle rancher, granted, I wasn't raised a cattle rancher. I was a rhinestone cowgirl uh, from the get-go. I'm a Texan, and I always went to the rodeos, and I don't want anybody to ever think I was born into cattle ranching, because I wasn't. My husband was. He's the multi-generational cattle rancher. I became a cattle rancher because I married Tommy. And I didn't really want anything to do with it in the beginning. Because I was producing music, doing my own thing, and I didn't really want anything to do with it. Because I didn't want to look at all that. I didn't know that at the time, but I didn't want to get involved in all that because I didn't want to feel all that stuff. And so it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation, because cattle ranchers, you talk about veganism, or you talk about some of these topics about how do you feel about the animals you raise for food. I mean, don't you ever have feelings for them? Those are taboo subjects. You don't talk about those things because cattle ranchers are doing what they think they have to do to feed the earth. You know, they're doing really all they know how to do. They think they're doing the right thing. It's the system that we live in. We live in systems. Dr. Sailesh Rao talks about this. We are in a system of normalized violence. So cattle ranchers, animal farmers, they think it's normal. And just because you go tell them, it's not normal, doesn't mean they're going to believe you. They're going to think you're crazy if you're a typical vegan, unless you've lived the lifestyle like I have. Like I've had this spiritual awakening. I mean, I went through literal spiritual rebirth on a cattle ranch. I went through a rebirth. That is the reason I believe that the Rowdy Girl message is so powerful. And in writing the book, I began to feel it. It's because, how it talks about in the Bible, you got to be born again. I don't know if you are familiar with the Bible to that
Very
degree.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it talks about, over and over in the Bible, it talks about, you got to be born again, you know, and I was born again. I am a different creature,
Hmm.
100%. And I had to have that spiritual awakening so concrete that nothing would shake it. I don't believe that people can really become an ethical vegan and eat animals again. Anybody that starts eating animals after they quote unquote go vegan, I don't think ever had that ethical awakening,
Hmm.
you know? So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but it's cultural, it's
Yes.
traditional, it's taboo to talk about anything other than the fact that they're doing, something good for their family, good for the planet. You start questioning it, and you're thought of as crazy.
So I'd never heard of the Cowboy Church. Is this one church or are there a
No,
lot of
there's a
them?
whole association
Whole association in Texas mostly
in
or
the country.
in the country? Okay, well, that's something to look up. So let me ask you this. Let's say they invite you. They invite you, you're going to be the guest pastor that day. What's your message?
My message is I will well that you wouldn't believe how many Bible verses I have in my book. I would get all my Bible verses together and I could just pick one or two or three. I could have a whole sermon on them. That's what I would do. I would talk about my experience, strength, and hope right from the pulpit. I would tell them what happened to me, and I would tell them what Bible verses that are in the Bible that I lean on like crazy.
Hmm. Well, I have no connection to the Cowboy Church, but I can tell you right here, you are invited to the Compassion Consortium, another CC, which is the spiritual center that was actually my husband's brainchild. We've been out there since 2019, serving spiritual needs of animal advocates. So we can talk about that later. So, Renee, as you go out into the world with this great book, I mean, you guys, seriously, number one, this woman can write. She is a masterful storyteller. The stories themselves, even if somebody was telling them who wasn't a good writer, would be so great. And you combine that with somebody who knows her way around the English language, exquisite. So you're gonna love it, love it, love it, love it. It's also going to give you tools for communicating with people that you thought you never ever could. So that's a wonderful future thing, near future thing that's going to be happening for all of us. So do get a hold of a copy of this book. There is also an audio copy that Renee reads herself. I love audiobooks these days and getting to feel like that author is speaking right to me. So you've got all these different ways to ingest this incredible material. So as we just kind of wind down, Renee, what's going on in your heart? What's tugging at you right now? What's the next step?
Well, the next step is going on tour. After the book publishes today, and then the next day I'll be at Book People in Austin, Texas, the largest bookstore in Texas, and I will be doing a talk Q&A and book signing, and it's going to be amazing. I'm going to have a videographer there documenting this, and photographer. And then from there, on the very next day, on the 27th, I fly to LA, and I have a big LA launch party, a private, a private LA launch party. And a lot of really cool vegans are going to be there. A lot of, some of our celebrity vegans are going to be there. And I'm so excited.
That's so great. That is so wonderful. Renee, bless your heart. Thank you for being in the world. Do need to do a shout out. I want to do a shout out to our wonderful sponsor for this episode, Compliment. These are supplements by vegans for vegans. Lovecompliment.org. They've got the multi that's just for people who eat a beautiful plant-based diet already. They've got wonderful protein powders. I happen to be very fond of the one that's chocolate. Have a look, lovecompliment.com. And if you put Main Street in all caps in your discount box, you get yourself 10% off, not just on your first order, but every order forever and ever. And that's because you are grandmothered in via yours truly. And also, Renee was kind enough to mention Main Street Vegan. We are having a New York City experience for our graduates and for those people who are enrolling for our 39th cohort happening this fall. So check all of that out at mainstreetvegan.com, where you will also see links to everything about Renee. You can find her website, which is rowdygirlsanctuary.org. You will find links to the wonderful book, Rowdy Girl Confessions of a Vegan Cattle Rancher, and all of her social media, which is considerable. And you know what? The connection. the connection with you, Renee, the connection with everybody listening, and the idea that one of these days somebody is going to look back and they're going to talk about people like you who laid the groundwork for a compassionate world. It's
Right.
coming. Thank you so much for your
Can I
time,
say
your
one more
wisdom.
thing?
Yeah, of
Can I say one
course.
more thing? Because I didn't say, and I need to say this, that the
Okay.
Rowdy Girl documentary is now able to be seen all over the world.
Oh, yay. How do we see it?
Yeah, all over the world. So right now in the United States, you can see it on PBS, you can see it on Apple TV, Roku.
Ooh.
You go to rowdygirlfilm.com and you can see all that. But if you live in another country, you go to guidedocs, guidedocs.com, and you
Mm-hmm.
can pull up the documentary and watch it anywhere.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, that's a dazzling documentary. Now, what a weekend. You watch the documentary, you read the book, and then you make a really, really good vegan meal. I like that.
And I just want to give my higher power all the credit because Victoria, as you know, without being higher powered, I would not be able to do this.
Being higher powered. I love that. Renee, God bless. And oh my gosh, happy birthday book. And everybody else, thank you for everything. May all your dreams come true. Now let's get ourselves out there and make Main Street vegan.